Love wants you, we can bring it on the floor. Never danced like this before. We don't talk about it. Dance.
Hey guys, what's cracking? It is Cracking Nation. Sorry about the long delay in video making. I have moved into college and there was an adjustment period. But today we are going to be getting back into our competitive Encyclopedia series, and today we're going to be looking at the concept of a lure. A lure is kind of a thing in Pokemon where, like, if you are able to use them effectively, it's definitely something that can really benefit your gameplay and your team building both. However, a lot of players misuse them and use them like they try to force lures on other players, and in that case, a lot of like more skilled players will definitely read through it and like not only will they not fall for it, but you'll be basically wasting a move slot on your team and setting yourself up for failure in the long run. So basically, we're going to be going over some effective lures as well as how to use them. Let's start with a little bit of how to use them actually. So basically, a lure is kind of a way of securing a win condition later in the game. A lot of sweepers function with a lure somewhere else in the team. For example, Altaria lure. It's one example of like a very common lure is like a Mega Altaria will lure in something like a Ferrothorn, and then Magnezone will come out on the Ferrothorn, proceeding to Hidden Power Fire, and help Altaria gear up for a sweep if that sweep is your win condition. That said, lures often operate in other ways. For example, if a Clefable is your win condition, you might be walled by a Heatran. So setting up maybe an Earthquake Latios, which is something we're going to get into, while it's not ridiculously uncommon, that's a more common lure. Those are kind of those little things that like Latios will lure in a Heatran. Heatran will feel safe switching in and then proceed to get bopped by Earthquake. Draco plus Earthquake obviously KOing Heatran. Those are things that are really going to help step up your gameplay on the ladder. Definitely some lures are more innovative than others. Some can be more expected than others. As far as how to play them, one thing you got to really be careful about is don't reveal your own lure at the wrong moment. A lot of times, I actually will not. The first time I'm in the lure situation, I'll actually play safer and not reveal it, So, for example, if I've got Earthquake on my Latios, I'll switch Latios out the first time because a lot of players, especially higher up in the ladder, will scout for that Earthquake turn 1 if they think, oh, maybe this Latios is running Earthquake. So a lot of players will pull a double there. And so if I make a safe play and I don't click Earthquake there, they're going to feel a lot safer leaving that Heatran in time 2. And then you can more effectively pull off your lure and trap that Pokemon, get the KO, set you up your win condition. A lot of players also try to force lures, and there's a really good example of a game I once had as far as forcing lures where I had a Heatran on the field and my opponent switched in Talonflame, and Natural Gift Talonflame is obviously not super popular. It's cool, but it's definitely not like it's a very big gimmick. But the fact that my opponent switched Talonflame into Heatran, and Heatran is like well regarded as a fairly reliable Heatran Heatran's well renowned as a Talonflame check/counter. So the fact that he switched Talonflame in was telling me, like, obviously this guy thinks he's got something up his sleeve. And so in situations like that, like I was able to effectively switch out, waste his Natural Gifts berry, and so he kind of revealed the ace up his sleeve a little bit too early. Not only did he reveal it too early, but he kind of tried to force it. And a lot of players, if you make weird plays like that, where you're trying to switch your lure in, are going to get very suspicious of what you're doing, especially once you get into more competitive tiers of play. But that said, that is basically how you're going to want to execute your lure, how lures function on the whole. But from there, we're going to want to look at some common lures on the OU level, as well as some uncommon ones, some that I like to use personally. First up, we have what I just talked about, which is going to be Earthquake Latios. This is really great for nabbing things like Heatran. Heatran is such a great threat in the OU tier right now. Draco just lures that thing in, and then you can proceed to Earthquake crap out of it. It also is pretty effective against Diancie, honestly. I think Earthquake either 2 KOs or OHKOs Diancie. Even like things like Excadrill, it does Ground plus Dragon is really great neutral coverage, things like Klefki. It just gets really great neutral coverage on the, or super effective coverage even on the OU tier. So that's definitely a really good option. However, because it is such a good option, it's actually not that unheard of. And Earthquake on Latios is becoming more and more of a staple on a lot of teams in the current meta trend. So definitely things to think about, like knowing what lures are going around can also really help you benefit in your gameplay because you can scout for those lures if your opponent is not as skilled and tries or maybe plays a little more recklessly with their lures. Next up, we've got a personal favorite of mine. Wapmelberry Azumarill is really dope because it basically lures in things like Scissor and Ferrothorn, who otherwise are really good checks to Azumarill, especially also like Mega Venu if it has not yet Mega Evolved. And you can predict that switch in, or just let them switch in and then click Natural Gift. You can secure a huge KO. So I really like pairing this Azumarill with Altaria. Actually, is what I used to do, because not only does it form like a fairy spam offensive fairy spam core, which offensive fairies are actually really underrated. It's really a great offensive typing because not such few things resist it, and a lot of the offensive fairies get coverage to hit things like fire and steel. But Whatmo Berry just lets you nab Ferrothorn and Scissor wicked hard, which are otherwise quite effective counter / checks. And so I personally will really run this, and then Azumarill can just Azumarill does that, and then basically clicks as many attacks as it wants after that, because it's basically done its job, and then Altaria can come in and be your win condition. Next up, we've got Earthquake Zard Y. Again, this is another thing, maybe not as common as Lotus, but kind of becoming more popular. This is kind of the same thing. It lets you nab Heatran. Heatran just runs around everywhere, so unfortunately Zard Y can't really run anything to lure in a Chansey and then beat it, because otherwise that's like the one true answer to Zard Y. We got Natural Gift Talent Flame. As I said, Apricot Berry gives it that ground type attack that you throw, and it does a lot of damage to Heatran specifically. As not really much else is that weak to ground. I guess it could help with like a Zard X or something, but it's really beyond that. It's really just for Heatran, which is otherwise quite reliable answer. I think maybe Magnezone. I'll leave Flare Blitz for Magnezone. But Natural Gift Talent Flame definitely was a little more popular in XY now compared to ORAS, but it is what it is. We've got Fire Blast Clefable, and this is probably the most staple now. This was kind of pretty exciting stuff to run earlier in ORAS, but this is basically the staple now on almost almost any tank Fable set. So I say this is a lure, and it's definitely a lure. A lot of players still feel safe, especially in the lower ladders, playing their steel types around Clefable, but Fire Blast can be huge on nabbing that KO against things like Ferrothorn and Scissor. Finally, you've got Grass, not Thundurus, which is definitely a cool Pokemon. Hippowdon is definitely not as big as it used to be when Sand Offense was super popular and earlier in ORAS, but Grass Knot is still really great for nabbing things like Hippo, really hitting them really hard, especially with a Life Orb and then a boost. It doesn't receive a lot of great coverage out of that, but the thing with Thundurus is it fits into a lot of Volt Switch spamming teams. Volt Turn spamming teams, sorry about that. And so basically, the common checks of Volt Turn are things like Clefable, Hippowdon, and so those Pokemon are really effectively answered, or at least Hippowdon can be really effectively answered by Grass Knot, because otherwise Hippowdon can avoid the 2-hit KO from Hidden Power Ice with the right SPDF investment. Regardless, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it was helpful. I'm hoping to be able to get back to at least mildly more regular schedule. My last week's CSL battle did end up in a forfeit, which is unfortunate, but at least I didn't have to find the time to record, so it is what it is. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. It is always very appreciated. Until next time, I will see you guys later. Kraken Nation, out.